My fiancée lied about her job while I paid every bill, so I walked away silently, and what happened next left her begging for forgiveness. I'm a 28-year-old guy who believed loyalty and sacrifice were the foundation of real love, the kind of love that survives on patience and quiet effort, the kind you build brick by brick until it feels unbreakable. Every morning, I'd step over cold tiles and into the kitchen where the hum of the refrigerator felt louder than any conversation, making coffee while she stayed wrapped in blankets, scrolling through her phone and whispering, "I've got meetings today, babe." Like that explained everything. I paid every single bill in our shared apartment, rent, utilities, groceries, while my fiancée claimed she was working remotely for a marketing firm that always seemed just out of reach, just out of clarity. There was a strange pride in being the dependable one, the man who could shoulder reality without complaining. And when she smiled at me and said, "It won't always be like this, I promise," I felt something warm settle in my chest like reassurance. I remember one night, the soft glow of the TV casting shadows across her tired face as she murmured, "You're my rock." And for a moment, the exhaustion in my bones felt holy, like proof that love demanded endurance. The air smelled faintly of lavender detergent and reheated pasta, and even the worn couch felt like a symbol of our shared struggle. Still, whenever I asked about her projects or clients, she'd tilt her head and laugh softly, saying, "It's boring, complicated stuff. You wouldn't want to hear it." Her voice honey-sweet, but carefully evasive. Friends would clasp my shoulder and grin, telling me, "Man, you're real husband material." And I'd chuckle, pretending the tightness in my chest was just fatigue, not doubt. I wanted so badly to believe this version of us, that stability meant safety and silent sacrifice meant devotion. As I lay awake that night, staring at the faint streetlight bleeding through our curtains, I convinced myself that everything I was giving would somehow circle back into a future where we both finally breathed easy. Even as a small, quiet question pressed heavier against my heart, I started noticing the cracks in her story the way you notice a draft in a sealed room. Subtle at first, almost ignorable, but impossible to forget once you felt it. I'm a 28-year-old guy who told himself love meant trust. So when her work hours stretched past midnight or didn't start until noon, I forced logic where instinct whispered unease. She'd sprawl across the bed tapping endlessly on her phone, and when I'd gently ask, "What time are your meetings tomorrow?" she'd smile without looking up and say, "Don't stress, babe. I've got it handled." Like my concern was an accusation. Her so-called paychecks were always delayed, always caught in some invisible system error, and I watched her swipe my card for another dinner she claimed was well-deserved, laughing as crystal glasses clinked while my mind quietly calculated overdrafts. "It's just a temporary hiccup," she insisted one evening, brushing her nails along my arm, her perfume thick and sweet in the dim restaurant light. "Once everything clears up, we'll be golden." I nodded, even as something in my chest ached with disbelief I refused to name. The apartment felt different then, heavier, filled with silences that hummed louder than our forced conversations, and her laughter seemed rehearsed, like a line she'd practiced too many times. When I tried to ask deeper questions, to understand her clients or deadlines, her eyes would cloud over and her voice would take on a wounded edge. "Why are you interrogating me?" she snapped one night, pushing her chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "Do you not trust me at all?" That question lodged under my ribs, sharp and undeniable, and instead of answering honestly, I swallowed it down with apologies I didn't know. "Of course I trust you," I murmured, even as my hands trembled slightly around my mug, the bitter scent of overbrewed coffee stinging my nose. I told myself relationships were about compromise, about swallowing discomfort for the sake of peace. Yet as I watched her drift further into secrecy, I couldn't shake the quiet fear that I was the only one truly showing up, and that maybe, just maybe, I was fooling myself more than she ever could. I'm a 28-year-old guy who always believed that if you search hard enough for the truth, you'll find it, even when your heart begs you to look away. The first real crack came late one evening when I walked past the bathroom door and heard her laughing softly on the phone, a tone I hadn't heard in weeks, warm and almost flirtatious. "You don't have to worry. He thinks I'm still working," she whispered, her voice low, casual, like what she was saying didn't matter at all. I stood there frozen, the hallway dim and cool against my skin, My breath caught somewhere between confusion and dread as her words replayed in my mind over and over. When she noticed me, her smile faltered just slightly, and she rushed off the call, hugging her phone to her chest like a secret. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, steady, like I wasn't unraveling inside. She shrugged too quickly and said, "Just a friend. You're imagining things," before brushing past me toward the kitchen. Later, sitting on the edge of our couch, I noticed her laptop left open on the coffee table, the screen glowing faintly like it wanted to confess something she wouldn't. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through browser tabs filled with random searches that didn't resemble marketing work at all, just scattered attempts at something vague and desperate. When I gently questioned her again, she sighed dramatically and muttered, "Why are you acting like this? You're starting to scare me," turning the situation back on me like a mirror I didn't ask for. The air felt thick, the kind that presses against your lungs and makes every thought heavier, and the scent of untouched dinner plates already growing cold made the silence unbearable. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that love sometimes meant uncomfortable questions, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her cup. In that moment, a chill traveled down my spine, not from what I knew, but from how deeply I could feel the truth inching closer, and how I wasn't sure I was ready for it yet. I'm a 28-year-old guy who always believed love deserved honesty, but standing there in our dim living room, I realized truth had become something she treated like an enemy. The tension between us felt thick, sticky, like the humidity before a storm, as I finally asked the question I'd been avoiding for days. "Tell me the name of the company you work for," I said quietly, my voice steady even though my heart was shaking like a loose wire. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, and then she forced a smile that didn't quite reach them. "Why does it matter?" she snapped, arms folding defensively across her chest. "You never questioned me before." The way she said it felt like blame, like I was the one disrupting peace instead of searching for clarity. I swallowed hard and replied, "Because I'm paying for everything, and I deserve to understand what's actually going on." The room smelled faintly of burnt toast and cheap candle wax, an odd mixture that made the air feel suffocating as she rolled her eyes and laughed nervously. "You're being dramatic," she muttered, pacing the floor, avoiding my gaze like it might expose something she couldn't hide anymore. When I pressed her again, she snapped, "I already told you I'm stressed. Don't push me like this," her voice trembling with irritation wrapped in fake hurt. Inside, something broke quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow fracture I could feel spreading through the foundation of everything I'd built for us. I wasn't just frustrated. I felt foolish, like I'd handed my devotion to someone who saw it as leverage rather than love. She finally tossed out another vague excuse, something about temporary instability and office politics, her words floating uselessly in the heavy silence between us. I nodded without arguing, a strange calm washing over my disbelief, as if my heart had already started stepping backward from the mess. And as she turned away, relieved that the confrontation had faded, I realized I wasn't backing down anymore. I was quietly preparing for something she had no idea was coming. I'm a 28-year-old guy who used to believe silence meant peace, but now I realize it was just the calm before she found a new way to twist everything against me. After that night, she didn't apologize or clarify. She adjusted, like someone recalibrating a strategy instead of acknowledging a mistake. Suddenly, every conversation felt staged, every smile too deliberate, every affection just a little too forced to be real. One evening, as the soft hum of our ceiling fan stirred warm air around the room, she slid her hand over my shoulder and murmured, "You've been so distant lately. It's like you don't even care anymore." Her tone was gentle, almost wounded, but the words felt sharp, like she was rewriting me into the villain of a story I didn't consent to. "I just want us to feel normal again," she added, pressing her forehead against mine, and I could smell her perfume trying to mask the tension beneath. Inside, my chest tightened with confusion and exhaustion as I whispered, "I'm just trying to understand what's going on," but she pulled back, eyes narrowed, and snapped, "You're the one creating problems from nothing." Then came the tears, slow, precise, almost rehearsed, and suddenly I was the one apologizing in the middle of our dimly lit kitchen, the floor cold beneath my feet and my thoughts spinning out of control. "You're making me feel like I'm always under attack," she sobbed, and I stood there wondering how my need for honesty had become emotional cruelty in her version of reality. It hit me then, painfully but clearly, that her lies weren't just about money or work anymore. They were about control, about shaping me into someone who doubted his own instincts. Every time I called out inconsistency, she countered it with guilt, fear, or fragile affection, wrapping manipulation and vulnerability so perfectly it made me second-guess everything I felt. And as she curled up beside me that night, whispering, "Please don't turn into someone who hurts me," I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her words settle like a warning, and something in me went frighteningly, unmistakably cold. I'm a 28-year-old guy who thought I'd already seen the worst of her deception, but nothing prepared me for how calculated the truth really was. It happened on a quiet afternoon when she stepped out to clear her head, leaving her tablet charging on the kitchen counter, the screen lighting up with every incoming notification like a silent confession begging to be read. I told myself not to look, that snooping would make me just as toxic, but my hands moved anyway, guided more by desperation than curiosity. What I found wasn't a hidden job or secret shift. It was a whole alternate identity she'd built online, filled with carefully curated photos and captions about her journey to becoming a lifestyle influencer. Messages poured in from friends I'd never met, praising her bravery and consoling her for living with such a controlling fiancé, and my stomach twisted as I scrolled further. "He doesn't understand me," she typed to someone. "He holds money over my head, so I can't leave." The words burned, sharp and humiliating, and I could almost hear her voice dripping with false vulnerability as she portrayed me as some emotional tyrant instead of the man who kept the lights on. I sat there, the air thick and stale, every sound muted except the frantic thudding of my heartbeat, realizing she didn't just lie about working, she lied about who I was to everyone around her. It wasn't failure or depression that kept her home. It was a fantasy she'd chosen over reality, and I was cast as the villain paying for it. When she returned, cheerful and relaxed, humming softly while slipping off her shoes, she looked at me and asked, "Why are you being so quiet?" I held the tablet in my hands, eyes burning with betrayal, and whispered, "So this is who I am to you?" Her smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face as she stepped closer. For the first time, I saw panic replacing performance, and I knew in that moment our future had split cleanly in two, but I hadn't yet decided which way the fallout would land. I'm a 28-year-old guy who realized that when your heart finally breaks, it doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just goes quiet, like a room after all the air has been sucked out. After confronting her with the truth, I didn't explode the way she probably expected. I didn't yell or insult her. I just stopped reacting, and that confused her more than any anger ever could. "Why are you acting like this?" she asked one night, her voice unusually soft as she stood in the doorway of our bedroom. The lamp cast dull shadows across the walls, and the sheets smelled faintly of fabric softener and tension. "You're scaring me," she added, biting her lip. The same performance she'd perfected every time guilt needed to look like vulnerability. I didn't even turn to face her. Instead, I said quietly, "You should be scared of what you've done, not how I'm handling it." She moved closer, brushing her hand along my arm, pretending tenderness where honesty should have lived. "I messed up, okay? But I didn't mean for things to get this bad," she whispered, and for a second, I could almost see the version of her I'd once loved bleeding through the cracks. But even that felt contaminated now, like nostalgia tainted by truth. I nodded without emotion, the flatness in my response making her believe she was regaining ground. Over the next few days, she shifted into desperate kindness, cooking meals, leaving affectionate notes, laughing too loudly at jokes I didn't make, as if effort alone could erase betrayal. She told her friends, "We're working through it," and kissed my cheek with performative reassurance, unaware that I'd already begun taking mental inventory of everything that was mine. Every plate she set, every apology she whispered, every forced hug behind closed doors only confirmed one thing. She thought my silence meant surrender. But the truth was far more dangerous. Because while she believed she was patching the cracks, I was quietly memorizing the structure, preparing to dismantle it piece by piece, and wondering just how much more she deserved to lose before I finally let go. I'm a 28-year-old guy who always thought walking away would be loud, explosive, something that shattered walls and left echoes, but mine came in the quietest way possible. The decision didn't feel heroic. It felt heavy, deliberate, like placing down a burden I'd carried far too long. That morning, the sky outside our window looked pale and colorless, and the apartment smelled faintly of the breakfast she'd tried to make for us as some final act of redemption. She kissed my cheek on her way out, forcing a bright grin and saying, "We're going to be okay, you'll see," as if repeating it enough times would magically make it true. I watched her leave, the click of the door locking behind her sounding colder than usual, and something inside me settled into an eerie calm. My hands moved quietly through the apartment, packing only what mattered, each soft rustle of fabric reminding me of the version of myself I'd buried for her comfort. As I unplugged the charger she always forgot to use and folded the hoodie she once claimed was her favorite, a wave of sadness brushed my chest. Not for her, but for the man who kept believing love meant self-erasure. I left behind a simple note on the kitchen counter, the pen dragging slightly against the paper as I wrote, "I need peace more than promises." It looked almost too gentle for everything she'd done. My phone buzzed just as I stepped outside, the crisp air hitting my lungs like the first real breath I'd taken in months. "Where did you go?" her text flashed, followed by, "What is this note supposed to mean?" I didn't respond. I just walked, the distant hum of traffic mixing with the quiet rhythm of my heartbeat. Still, as I stood beside my car, keys trembling slightly in my hand, I felt a strange knot of fear twist beneath my ribs, not because I doubted leaving, but because I knew the moment she realized I wasn't coming back, she wouldn't go down without one last desperate fight. I'm a 28-year-old guy who never imagined I'd witness someone unravel the way she did, but the messages started piling in before the sun even finished setting. My phone vibrated nonstop, her name flashing across the screen like a warning I refused to answer. "Please pick up," she texted, followed by, "I can't do this alone." And then, "They're evicting me." I swear I didn't think it would happen this fast. By morning, I heard from mutual friends that she'd been crying in the building lobby, mascara streaked down her cheeks, voice echoing through the hallway as she told anyone who would listen. He left me with nothing. I don't even know how I'm supposed to survive. The air in that place, apparently, felt charged with desperation, like even the walls were tired of absorbing her chaos. Someone sent me a shaky video of her pacing back and forth, clutching her phone, whisper shouting, "I just made a mistake." He promised he'd never abandon me, as if abandonment wasn't exactly what she'd been preparing me for all along. That night, I sat alone in the silence of my new room, the faint buzz of a flickering hallway light leaking under the door, listening to her voicemails stack up one after another. Her voice cracked through each one, raw and frantic. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't think you'd actually leave me like this," she sobbed, her breath uneven and panicked in my ear. "Please just talk to me. I don't know what to do anymore." Part of me felt the weight of every memory trying to claw its way back into my chest, but another part remembered the lies, the manipulation, the careful performance that turned me into her villain. I didn't respond. I just listened, as her confidence dissolved into pure fear, as the control she held over everything finally slipped through her trembling fingers. And when the final voicemail came through, her whisper reduced to a broken murmur saying, "I think I ruined everything." I realized her rock bottom wasn't just beginning, it was pulling her down faster than she ever saw coming. I'm a 28-year-old guy who never thought I'd hear her voice stripped of arrogance, stripped of control, reduced to pure desperation, but the voicemail that night proved just how far she'd fallen. Her tone wasn't angry or defensive anymore. It trembled, thin and fragile like glass about to shatter. "Please," she whispered, "I'll do anything. I swear, just don't leave me like this." And something in those words sounded more like terror than love. She showed up outside my building the next afternoon, eyes swollen and hollow, her once perfect hair pulled back messily, as if she'd given up pretending to be composed. The winter air clung to her sweater, and the scent of cheap perfume mixed with cold metal as she stepped closer and said, "I made a huge mistake. I know that now." I stood still, hands in my pockets, watching the person who once controlled my emotions unravel right in front of me. "You don't understand what it's been like," she pleaded, voice cracking. I've lost everything. I just need you. I need us. For a second, the streets blurred into memories. Her laughter, her soft apologies, the moments I convinced myself were real. But then her manipulation echoed louder than her tears. I promise I'll get a real job, she continued, reaching for my hand with trembling fingers. I'll fix everything. Just come back home. I stared at her, noticing how her desperation now mirrored the doubt she'd forced me to swallow for months, and I realized how painfully ironic this moment was. I begged you for honesty, I said quietly, my voice calm but final, and you made me feel like I was crazy for even asking. Her face crumpled as I stepped back, tears streaking down her cheeks as she whispered, "You're supposed to love me. You can't just leave." I turned away, the echo of her sobs following me down the sidewalk. But as I walked, a strange unease tightened in my chest. Not because I wanted her back, but because I knew this wasn't her last attempt to pull me back into her chaos. I'm a 28-year-old guy who thought rock bottom would humble her, but instead, it just taught her new ways to survive. A few days after I turned her away, my phone lit up with messages that felt colder than her tears ever could. Someone sent me a screenshot of her latest post, a long paragraph drenched in sadness and carefully curated victimhood. I gave my heart to someone who walked away the moment things got hard. She'd written, a soft filtered selfie beneath it, eyes glistening, lips trembling just enough to win sympathy. The comments poured in, people comforting her, defending her, calling me heartless without knowing a single truth. "Men always leave when women need them most," she'd replied to one, and something twisted painfully in my chest as I realized she was still trying to control the narrative. My phone buzzed again, this time from her directly. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," she typed. "I just don't know how else to cope. You abandoned me." That word hit harder than it should have. Abandoned. As if months of lies and manipulation hadn't already dismantled everything long before I walked away. Later that evening, she called, her voice suddenly precise and bitter. "I don't understand why you're acting like some hero right now," she muttered. "You think people won't see through this?" I could hear the sharp edge beneath her false calm, the same edge she used when she knew tears couldn't win. "You're not perfect either," she added, her tone carrying quiet threat. I could say a lot if I wanted to. The air in my small apartment felt heavier as those words settled, the dim yellow light flickering slightly above me like it sensed the shift too. I said nothing, letting silence stretch between us, listening to her breathe on the other end, waiting for me to snap, to defend, to break. Instead, all I felt was a deep, unsettling tension creeping under my skin, the kind that whispers more chaos is on the way. And when she finally hung up without another word, I knew her desperation had transformed into something far more dangerous, and I wasn't sure how far she'd go to make me hurt the way she now did. I'm a 28-year-old guy who used to believe strength meant staying, fixing, enduring, but standing alone in my new space, I finally understood that real power was choosing myself without needing applause. The room was small but peaceful, sunlight stretching across bare floors, and the faint scent of fresh paint mixing with something unfamiliar. Calm. For the first time in months, there were no forced smiles across from me, no tension wrapped in perfume, no lies hidden behind soft apologies. Just silence that felt honest. My phone buzzed again, a final message from her blinking on the screen like a ghost trying to haunt a life it no longer owned. "I never meant to hurt you," she wrote, the words dripping in the same regret that once dismantled me. I stared at it for a long time, the glow lighting up my tired face, before finally whispering to the empty room, "You just never meant to tell me the truth either." Saying it out loud hurt, but it also healed something that had been fractured far too long. I thought about the nights I cried quietly while she slept, the moments I doubted my own sanity, the times her voice convinced me my needs were cruelty. All of it felt distant now, like a storm I survived but refused to revisit. I opened the window, letting cool air wrap around my skin, and felt a strange sense of gratitude, not for what she did, but for what it taught me about my worth. Friends checked in, worried, curious, relieved, and when one asked, "Do you miss her?" I paused, then answered honestly, "I miss who I thought she was, but I'm grateful I finally see who she is." The words landed softly, like a truth that no longer bruised. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the walls in amber light, I realized her chaos no longer echoed inside me. My peace was growing louder. And while part of me wondered if she'd ever truly understand the damage she caused, I knew one thing for certain: my silence was no longer surrender. It was freedom.